Welcome to the next coding challenge, which, as you can imagine, is all about state. So what I want you to build in this challenge is this very simple date counter. So here we have the current date, but then when we click here on the plus icon, you see that the count increases to 1, and then it says 1 day from now, it is Tuesday, June 22, while before it was 21. And so then when we keep going up, it basically keeps adding this number of days to the current date. We can also go back in time. So like 6 days ago, it was this date. So that's the most basic thing. But then here we can also adjust the step. So for example, if the step is 5, then each time we click on the plus button, it increases by 5. So no longer by 1. So 10, 15, 20, and so on and so forth. And the calculation then here, of course, is still the same. So that's what we're going to build. So open up a new code sandbox with react.new, or of course, as always, you can also build this challenge on your local computer. So for that, you can just create a new React app, just like we have been doing before. Now here, just to make sure you can see, I will make this a bit bigger, maybe not that big. And then I will actually just start writing a little bit of code here. So just to show you what I actually want. So I want you to create this counter function, which for now will just return tests. And then all we want to do is to include that counter right here. And that's it. So you can leave everything else the same, even the styles. Let's just leave them here and just focus on this counter functionality. Now this part here with the dates can be a little bit tricky. So what I want you to focus on the most is actually the counter functionality here. So if the dates are a bit too tricky, then just leave that until the end and you can just print the current count value down here. Or you can also just Google, for example, JavaScript add days to date. Okay, so I will leave this up here so you can see what you are supposed to build. And then I meet you back here in a minute with my solution. All right, so welcome back. Hopefully you had some success with this. So there's actually a lot of moving parts here with handling the events and all the state. So hopefully the lectures that we had previously were enough for you to understand how this works. But if not, there's really no problem with that at all. So hopefully you just did anything, even if just the very simple counter. That's also fine. But anyway, we know that we want this count value here to update in the UI. So the view of this component should update whenever we click on one of these buttons. So that's a good sign that we need some state, right? So let's start by creating the count state. So const count and set count is useState. And now for some reason the useState didn't automatically get import. So we need to do that by hand from React. Nice. And now, well, we need to show this count on the screen, and then we need to update it. So as always, the same 3 steps. So first, declaring the state variable, then use it in the JSX, and then update it. So here we are missing the default of 0. And then let's just create one div with these 2 buttons, and also with the value of the counter itself. So starting with that value, actually, let's just count, and then the count value. Oh, what's that? So count is 0, that's correct. And now we need some buttons. So button and on click. And here I will actually not create the event handler function separately, but instead I will just define them inline here. But if you did it separately, that's of course no problem at all. So what do we want to do here? So this one here is to decreasing the value. So set count, and we want the new count to be the current count minus 1. So what that means is that we want to update the count state based on the current state. And therefore, here we now should pass in a callback function. Remember that? So I'm going to write C for count. So this stands for count. And remember, it is the current value of the count state. And so then we want to return that count minus 1. And that should already be it. Let's just use this here for the minus sign. All right. Then let's copy paste. Well, let's actually just close down this sidebar. So copy and paste, and here just +1. So give it a save. And well, let's just adjust here the output a bit. And beautiful. That's working already. So the component view is being updated as we update the state. Great. And so now let's just also display the date down there. So for that, let's create a paragraph. Or first, let's actually calculate that date. So maybe you Googled how to do this as I advised you to. So let's just define a variable called date and then new date. And of course, you can just leave it like this, or you can just pass in a string, for example, to define any other date that you want. For example, June 21st, 2027, so just for fun. So that's not the date today, as you can imagine. But anyway, now here we can, on the date object, call the setDate method. And so then here we can do date plus get the current date. Whoa, what's that? Yeah, date dot. So getting the current date and then adding a value. So that value can be the count. All right, so we're using now our count to add that count to the current date, basically. And so then that's what we can output down here. But again, this part was kind of optional here, really. So this is not what I was concerned about. What matters is that you got the state part right. So, but anyway, here let's now log the date and then convert it to a nice readable string. So toDate string. All right, now here we got some problems, and that's because, right now our JSX has 2 root elements. That's because I, by mistake, placed this outside the div, but there we go. So you see, that's already working. Nice. Now we are missing that part here that says the 30 days from now, for example, or today, or 10 days ago. So let's do that. And so to do this, let's add maybe another span. Let's wrap this one into a span element. And then let's create a span. So just for some inline text. And now here, then let's create that part of the string. So if the count is 0, then it is today. So then here we can output the string today is. And if not, for now, let's return nothing. And here we have a problem. And that's because here we need a colon. All right. So count is not 0 right now, but now it is. So today is this date. So that's correct. But now as an alternative here, we need to also account for the past and for the future. So we actually need 2 more different values here. And so here we need another ternary operator. Now using nested ternaries is quite ugly and can be quite unreadable. So usually I advise against using that. But well, here let's just break that rule. So basically here we have the else branch. And so then here we can ask if the count is greater than 0, then the string should be, let's use a template literal, then the count days from today is, and else count days ago was. Not like this. All right. So Prettier took care of formatting it for us. So it's at least a little bit more readable. So that works. 5 is, here we're missing the space. And now for the past. So -4 days ago was. So let's quickly do a math.absolute here. And yeah, that fixes it. So we have now this main counter working. So basically this part here is working. And now let's worry about the step. And the step is going to be quite similar. So const step and set step. And here I need to learn how to write step, apparently. And then use state again. And here the step by default is 1. So because by default, when we click here, we just want the counter to go up by 1. All right. And now we can just like copy paste this because it's going to look very similar. But here then we have the step. Then here also the step. And here also set step in both these places. So let's see. And yes, that's working. However, of course, if we now click here, then that step is not being applied here. So we are still simply adding 1 or subtracting 1. So how do we now put these two together? Well, as I was just saying, by default, we are just subtracting or adding 1. But that's no longer what we want. Instead, we want to add or subtract the step. So just replace the 1 here, step, and yes, that's working. Nice. And we can even go negative here, I think. Maybe we should change that, but never mind. That's too much work. So now if we add 3, we are actually going into the past. But yeah, that's no problem. Great. So that wraps up this challenge. It works exactly as what we had set out to build. So hopefully you had some fun with this. Hopefully you also did have some success. And so yeah, let's keep going in this section. And actually we will just, in the next lecture, create a brand new, very, very nice project. So I hope to see you there as soon as possible.